Hello and welcome to the channel. For today's tutorial, I'll be sharing with you how to draft a deep plunging neckline dress with a spiral flounce. So if it's your first time viewing my channel, please hit on the subscribe button and let's start. So I've gone ahead to mark my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to under bust, and my shoulder to waistline. The next step I'm going to take is to mark my neckline. So I'm just going to mark my basic neckline, which is 3 by 3, 3 inches width and 3 inches depth. So after doing that, I'm going to place my French curve and I'm going to go ahead to draw out my neckline. So next, I'm going to place my tape and I'm going to mark my shoulder divided by 2. So my shoulder is 14 divided by 2, I have 7, and I'm going to mark. So from that point, I'm going to place my tape and I'm going to come down by 1 inch. From that 1 inch mark, I'm going to extend it to my neckline, drawing my shoulder slant or shoulder slope. So from here, I'm going to get my chest line, and to do that is your bust divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So I have 7 inches and I'm going to go ahead to mark. From that point, I'm going to extend it down to the other side of the pattern paper and I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line. Next step, I'm going to divide what I have there into 2 and I have 3.5, and at that middle part I'm going to come in by ½ inch. So from there I'm going to place my French curve to draw my armhole. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead to place and mark my bust circumference divided by 4. What I'm going to do after here is to place my French curve touching those points and I'm going to draw out my armhole. Next is to draw my dart intake, and I'm going to place my tape and I'll mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. I'm going to mark it at my bust point, at my under bust, and at my waistline. After drawing that, the next step is to place my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line connecting the dots. So after that, I'll go ahead to place my tape and I'll outline my chest line. After drawing my chest line, I'll still go ahead to mark my nipple to nipple point and I'm going to connect. So I'm going to go down to the down part of my pattern and I'm going to mark 1 inch at both sides. And at the under bust, I'm also going to repeat the same process. Then I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line connecting the marks that I have made. After connecting those lines, I'm going to place my French curve touching my bust point and my under bust, and I'm going to go ahead to draw my cup part of the pattern. So after doing this, I'm also going to repeat it at the other side. So if you don't have a French curve, you can go ahead and do it with a freehand sketch. Next is to draw the princess dart. So if you notice, I divided my armhole into 2. My chest line is 7 inches and dividing it into 2, I have 3.5. So at that 3.5 mark, that is where my princess dart is going to start from. So what I'm going to do is to place my French curve touching that 3.5 and touching the line at my chest line, and I'm going to go ahead to connect. So after connecting the line, at that point, I'm going to come down by ½ inch at the lower part and come up by ½ inch at the upper part. So after doing that, I'm just going to connect it down to the chest line or the previous princess dart line that I drew. So after connecting it down to that part, what I'm going to do next is to go ahead to take my marker and I'm going to outline the marks that I have made so that it's going to be visible for you to see. So after drawing the line, what I'm going to do is to measure what I have there, the ½ inch up and the ½ inch down. That's giving me 1 inch. So from this armhole curve, I'm going to go out by 1 inch. So this is to replace the 1 inch that I'm going to take out from that part. So I'm just going to take my French curve and I'm going to extend it to that part just this way. I'll go ahead to use my marker to outline the line. Next, I'll be marking out my body circumference. At my bust, I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'm going to go ahead to mark my sewing allowance. So after doing that, at the under bust, I'm going to mark my under bust circumference. After marking my under bust circumference divided by 4, I'm going to mark my dart intake, and I'll go ahead to add my sewing allowance. Going down to my waist, I'm going to mark my waist circumference, measure the dart intake, and add my sewing allowance back. So after doing this, what I'm just going to do is to go ahead to connect my line from the bust to the under bust and down to the waist. So whatever I have at my bust, I'm going to extend it down to my chest line. So when drawing, don't bother about how this part is. By the time you join it, the outside parts will come inside. So what you're going to do next is to place your French curve, and you're going to go ahead to redraw a new armhole curve. So after doing this, you're going to determine how high or low you want your dress to be. So I'm just going to go up by 1 inch. So from that 1 inch point, that's where I'll be drawing the neckline of the dress. So at first, I'm going to just use my freehand sketch to check if the pattern I have is okay. So at my chest line, I'm going to come in by ½ inch. At my bust line, I'm going to come in by ½ inch, and from there I'm just going to connect it down to those lines. Going down to my under bust line, I'm just going to make a little mark there, and I'm going to slant in from my bust down to my under bust. So from this part, depending on how deep you want it, you can come up by 3 inches or 3.5 inches. So from there, I'm just going to slant it to that point. After that, I'm going to go ahead to outline what I have drawn out already. So after doing this is what I have. And bear in mind that at the upper part, that's where you'll be inserting the strapless hand or the spaghetti strap for this dress. You're just going to come in by 1.5 or 1 inch from that side. So what I'll do is just to go ahead and cut out the pattern. So after cutting out, this is what your pattern is going to be looking like. Sorry, the brown paper I'm working with is a bit unsteady. So when you're sewing your dress, you notice that there's a top stitch here. So the reason why they did this is that they inserted an iron at this part of the dress to hold it down. If not, this part of the dress will be very open and it's not going to lie flat this way on the chest. So while sewing, you're going to fix an iron. I don't really know the name, but there's an iron at that part of the dress that made the neckline stay flat. So while sewing, don't forget to add your ½ inch round for joining allowance for the dress. So we'll be moving over to the back pattern. I've gone ahead to just draw out the basic pattern, the zipper allowance, my neckline, my shoulder to bust, under bust, and waistline. So the next thing I'm going to do right now is to take my dart. So for the dart for the back, I'm going to mark my shoulder to bust plus 1 inch. So I'm going to mark that line. From that line, I'm going to measure from my zipper allowance. So every measurement I'm taking is starting from my zipper allowance, and I'm going to measure my nipple to nipple divided by 2, and I'm going to mark it at my under bust and down to my waistline. So what I'm going to do right now is to go ahead to connect, draw a straight line. So after drawing a straight line, I'm going to mark ½ inch at both sides. After marking ½ inch at that point, I'm going to go ahead to connect it down to the line at the upper part. So after connecting it, I'm done with the dart for the back. And the next thing I'm going to do is to insert my body measurement or circumference. At my bust, I'm going to insert my bust circumference divided by 4 plus my sewing allowance. At the under bust, I'm going to insert my under bust circumference divided by 4. I'm going to mark my dart intake. I'll measure it, and then insert my sewing allowance. So note, all my measurement is starting from my zipper allowance. So going down to the waistline, I'm going to mark my waist circumference, measure the dart intake I have, and I'm going to replace it. After replacing it, I'm going to go ahead to mark my sewing allowance. So after marking my sewing allowance, the next step is to join the lines that I have, and I'm going to extend what I have from at my bust to my chest line. From there, I'm going to extend it down to my under bust and down to my waistline. So with this, we'll be moving to the upper part. So if you notice, it's a strapless gown, so there's no need for the shoulder. What I'm going to do is to cut it out from my chest line. So depending on how low you want it, if you want it higher, you can go ahead to take it up, or you can take it lower. So I'm just going to go ahead, mark 1/2 inch at the lower part, and I'm going to connect it to the chest line point. So the reason why I'm doing this is to take out that bulginess at the back of the dress. So after that, I'm just going to go ahead to cut out my pattern. After cutting out, this is what my back pattern looks like, and we'll be moving over to the skirt pattern. So this line at this point will be serving as my starting point. So from there, remember that the upper part of the dress, which is the top part, stopped at my half length, which is 17 inches. So from that point, I'm going to place and I'm going to get my skirt length. So remember, whatever your skirt length is, measure 2 inches above your knee to enable you walk. If not, if it's on your knee, it's going to be too tight for you. So after that, you're just going to add 1/2 inch for turn up or sewing allowance at the lower part. So I'm just going to draw a line straight to indicate where my skirt length is. So next step, I'm going to measure 7 inches from there to get my hip points, and I'm just going to outline that line. So after that, next thing is to insert my waist circumference, and my waist circumference divided by 4, I'm going to go ahead to mark, and I'll add my sewing allowance. So after marking that, at the hip point, I'm going to insert my hip circumference divided by 4, and I'm going to mark, and I'm going to add my sewing allowance. Going down to the lower part of your skirt, in order to make it fitted, what you're going to do is whatever you have at your hip, you're going to minus 2 inches. So if your hip circumference is 40 divided by 2, you have 10 plus your sewing allowance 1.5, that's 11.5. You're going to minus 2 inches from 11.5, and you're going to mark. So after that, you're going to connect from your waist down to your hip, and from your hip down to your skirt length. So after marking out, I'm going to go ahead to blend my hip point to avoid having a sharp edge. So after that, what I'm going to do is just to cut out my pattern, and my front pattern is ready. So please, at this point, if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up. So after cutting, this is what I have, and what you're just going to do is to add your zipper allowance, place this pattern on another pattern, and add your zipper allowance to it. So in our next video, we'll be cutting out the spiral flounce of this dress, and don't forget to join us. See you in our next video, and give this video a thumbs up and leave your comment also at the comment section.